Hello and welcome to this recorded session of Beyond the Contract, Pedagogy and Developing the Course Syllabus. My name is Samantha Tweetmeyer and I originally delivered this workshop in March. So this is a on your own time version of the workshop, which was originally designed for sort of online group work. So keep that in mind. It's part of building our syllabus that we need to recognize colonial harm and take on board what that means in terms of a land acknowledgement. So, of course, I'm presenting on behalf of Queen's CTL and situated on the Queen's campus, which is on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. In giving this acknowledgement, we need to give recognition to the theft and abuse of the stolen lands and how our current activities uphold the settler state and work against Indigenous peoples who continue to live upon this land. We have been called to action specifically as educators by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations to work towards healing these relationships that were torn apart by genocide and ethnic cleansing. This is something that if you are, taking a land acknowledgement and putting it in your syllabus, you need to also be considering broader implications of how you might be working against your own motivation there later in the syllabus with content. And that is something that we will somewhat address today in this session. So the session has got three parts. The first one is a fairly introductory level thinking about the syllabus. We're going to look sort of what is in a syllabus, what do we understand a syllabus to mean, and how you perceive it coming into this workshop. Then we're going to go through some workshopping of how we can conceptualize and reconceptualize the syllabus. And then finally, we'll be concluding with an analysis, as I mentioned earlier, on accessibility and inclusion and how important the syllabus is to your overall course in terms of taking on board institutional culture, diverse ways of knowing, and how the physical representation and philosophy of the syllabus can actually make your course more or less accessible to the students within it. So starting with section 1, thinking about the syllabus, what is in a syllabus? There's just a brief reflection activity. You can pause the video and take a moment to yourself, just to jot down what types of requisite content you usually understand the syllabus to contain. And you can admire the cartoon, which I think very much speaks to every instructor's understanding of communicating the syllabus to students. It's in the syllabus. And so, what is in the syllabus is the question. So I'm going to move to the next slide, and if you've restarted the video, welcome back. So we can understand what is in a syllabus to largely include this checklist I have here presented on this slide: instructor information, course materials, course schedule, assignment details, institutional and departmental policies, course policies, and any supports for students that need to be provided. Quite a lot of these are actually pre-included. Your department will often give you, an institutional framework of what the syllabus needs to contain. Queen's has a few of these policies that are preset and you don't really have a choice, and they're pre-drafted for you as well. And then your departments might also have some pieces that need to go in the syllabus. And so in a lot of ways, there are elements of what's in the syllabus that you don't have as much control over. However, I will be giving some advice on how you can adapt some of these elements to make them more palatable to students and more effective as a teaching and learning device in your course without getting in the way of the standard policy that's required to be in your syllabus. A really great way to make sure that you've got all the essential elements is to use the Center for Teaching and Learning syllabus review tool. I have the link listed here if you can read it. So if you go to the CTL, to their resources bank, It's there, and it should not be too difficult to find. So just on the memescape of my presentation today, a few more memes. This is about, this frustration that a lot of teachers have with students not reading the syllabus. And I wanted to point them out because they're very common, they're very frequent, and I want you to keep this in mind. So before we move forward, I have another reflection activity for you. And this is to consider what a syllabus actually means to you as a document in your course structure. So first of all, you can pause the video and just take a couple of minutes and review and look over this slide and take a note of which of these definitions you strongly agree with, which you maybe somewhat agree with, and which you disagree with. Yeah, that's basically it. So go ahead and pause the video and restart when you're ready to move on. So now that you've assigned strongly agree, somewhat agree, or disagree, in your mind to some of these definitions, the points I'd like you to consider in those decisions that you just made include, what most spoke to you about the definitions that you agreed with. Were there any definitions that you disagreed with, and why did you disagree with them? And in thinking about those, do you feel that any of the definitions made more sense to you because of the discipline that you are in or your own learning experiences, and that this might differentiate your responses from other people's responses? And finally, are there any definitions that you think are missing from this list? So moving into our next section, where we're actually going to talk about how we conceive the syllabus, and hopefully I'm going to actually challenge some of your preconceived notions of those definitions a little bit. Recall the set of memes about read the syllabus? Well, I decided as a teacher, that's the only type of meme I see about the syllabus. So I did a little bit of deep dive on the internet to find what the students say about the syllabus. And just a hint, if you're looking for this, apparently it is called Syllabus Week. The first week of classes is called Syllabus Week by students. And so you can find these if you start looking under the right terms. And you'll notice first day of class, syllabus expectations, rules, just gross. I hate the first week of classes, right? And then the next one is really pointing out a frustration students obviously have. College professors are talking to each other. And then I said, it's on the syllabus, but the question had nothing to do with the syllabus. So there's very much there presenting a disconnect between what students feel a syllabus provides versus the knowledge they expect to get from their professors. Or maybe the syllabus actually didn't provide the depth of information the student needed, and it could have. Then we have Syllabus Week, where the points don't matter and the quizzes are made up. And then finally, remember that project I only mentioned during Syllabus Week, it's due Tuesday. So these are some fairly negative opinions about not just Syllabus Week, but the syllabus itself and how it's used in the classroom. What we know is that students generally will skim a syllabus and look specifically for deadlines and assessment breakdowns. This is usually a piece related to course shopping. They're skimming it to see if they actually want to take the course, and so they'll look at the deadlines and the assessment breakdowns. In the first few weeks of class, they're likely going to pull the dates and deadlines from the syllabus and enter it into some sort of planner that they're working with. And that is why they never return to the syllabus, because they've taken note of what they feel are the most important pieces. The only other thing that would bring them back to the syllabus is if they are checking for readings on a weekly basis or looking for quizzes and due dates. So again, it's more of a skimming for very specific deadlines that brings them back to the syllabus throughout the semester. So how do we bridge this conceptual gap between how we as instructors in the course and the designers of the course understand the syllabus and how students understand the syllabus? So the syllabus as contract metaphor is probably the most commonly espoused in our standard definitions of a syllabus. So for example, Parks and Harris, the purpose of a syllabus, they define the first purpose of a syllabus, either explicitly or implicitly, is to serve as a contract between the instructor and the student. Or Kaufman in 2015, teaching and learning can be improved with a syllabus contract mentality. So one thing that we want to keep note of is that there are good reasons to think about the contract or the syllabus as a contract. It can improve teaching and learning, the teaching and learning experience for educators and learners by providing them a shared understanding of the course content and the course direction. The shared information piece is really important in terms of preventing potential conflicts of understanding that can lead to confusion and impair the delivery of the course. It provides clarity of rules and the responsibilities, both of the students and the instructor, to the course, to each other, and to the to fellow students in the class. And of course, as already discussed, it outlines the responsibilities of institutional policies or the requirements of institutional policies, situating the course within the department and the university's policies that are required. However, when a contract assumes there are aligned interests which it is trying to negotiate, it also assumes that those interests are separate. There's my obligations and there are your obligations. There's my responsibilities and your responsibilities. This separation of interests, the me and the you, the teacher and the student, instead of us, can actually reinforce a breakdown of trust between the teacher and the student. It leaves less room for flexibility around content, around responding to student needs. But like, if we take on board what happened with COVID-19 happening out of nowhere, very little room for flexibility in people's syllabi to respond to this fairly severe interruption. Another way in which the syllabus as contract mentality can actually produce negative divides is that it acts to almost protect educators from students, right? All those policies and legalese are in there so that a professor can say, oh, no, you can't challenge me on this. It's in the syllabus. This is good, of course, in some ways, but in other ways, it really is, again, speaking to that breakdown of trust between educators and students and learners, I should say. So Mano Singham argues or declares, it's time to declare war on the traditional course syllabus. If there is one single artifact that pinpoints the degradation of liberal education, it is the rule-infested, punitive, controlling syllabus that is handed out to students on the first day of class. And while you might not fully get on board with throwing out the syllabus as contract metaphor, I think we can come to some understanding that those barriers that I pointed out earlier about how students perceive the syllabus might be able to be addressed by taking on board this criticism in a serious way. So another approach we might take if we're understanding the syllabus as metaphor is to try and come up with some new metaphors. One of the really important things about understanding the syllabus as a product of your teaching pedagogy is that you as the instructor can choose your metaphors. And a conscious awareness of the metaphors that you are using in your syllabi can allow you to understand your own understanding of the syllabus and allow you to find that room to grow the syllabus and build it in more creative ways. So some examples of syllabus metaphors that we might consider include a syllabus as permanent record. So this is an understanding of the window shopping approach. It's a permanent record of the course. Maybe it's something that's housed in a syllabus bank somewhere, and people can look back on it and say, this is what that course offered and how it operated. Maybe it's used in tenure requirements. And again, it's like, this is what I did. So a permanent record. Syllabus as learning tool. This is where it's helping students become effective learners in the course. Maybe it's providing particular skills descriptions that are actually educational. Syllabus as playlist. We look at a list of readings required for the course, and today those readings might include the viewing of videos or listening to podcasts. This is a list of content, and it's a list of content in a particular order that you as the instructor curated. There's no reason why you could not think of that as a playlist for the course. Syllabus as FAQ, syllabus as map and legend. Map and legend, you know, you need these things in order to not be lost in the course. Syllabus as user or operating manual, how to use and maintain the elements. You know, in an operating manual, you often get this is how you use it, but then this is also how you clean it, and this is how you repair it. So maybe those pieces are important in a syllabus in terms of how students get the most out of the course that they can. Yeah. So considering now, thinking more broadly about what kinds of metaphors we might think about in terms of not even like the whole syllabus, but even just a piece of the syllabus, right? The playlist is not the whole syllabus. Brainstorm some of your own metaphors. Take a moment, you know, just a few seconds, jot down what kind of metaphors you think might be useful in thinking about any syllabus. And once you've sort of feel like you've got one or two down and you would like some more ideas, I actually saved a list from the students who were in the live version of this session. So some others that came in were syllabus as user guide or policy guide, syllabus as creative expression. And I actually am going to show you an example of creative ways to do syllabi. Syllabus as travel guidebook. I really like this one. I'm thinking like a Lonely Planet style. I like that approach, this idea that the students are going on some sort of journey. Synthesis of long research. I thought this was a really interesting one, speaking to the fact that some courses are really, you know, the product of your thesis potentially, or another larger project that you've been working on, and you're trying to translate this long research agenda into course material. Project with various stakeholders. I like this one, approaching the syllabus actually like it is a project to be implemented, and you have to have all stakeholders on board and all stakeholder interests met. And that kind of speaks to an approach to the syllabus, which I'll discuss in a minute, where you actually negotiate pieces of the syllabus in the first couple of weeks of course with your students. So before we leave this slide, if you want, you can pause the video and take a few minutes to actually consider a syllabus you currently already have and really look at it and think, what is the metaphor that has been driving this syllabus so far? What sort of metaphors do you actually see in place? Because once you take ownership of the metaphors that are creating your syllabus, you have room to change those metaphors, adapt those metaphors, and move them forward. So a metaphor that I want to spend a little bit more time on today is to understand the syllabus as a manifesto. This is really getting to the heart of bringing your pedagogy into the syllabus. Be very clear about your pedagogical approach somewhere in the syllabus. Be clear with your students. Detail the pedagogy of your classroom and the logic and reasoning for it. This will help connect your students to the why of the learning beyond the how. So if we move beyond the syllabus as a user guide, it's you know, the syllabus is going to actually explain to students why you are doing things in the order that you're doing them, why the assignments contribute to their learning. A really important element of this, and it's probably the easiest first step, is to just put yourself in the syllabus. Introduce yourself in the syllabus. Use I statements. You wrote this thing and you designed the content, and so you should put yourself in the syllabus and speak to the students from the position of you as the instructor. And this is, this will help you start to draw in pieces of your pedagogy. Demonstrate explicitly or implicitly your ideas about teaching and learning. And to be clear, implicitly is probably going to be more effective in this regard. You don't need to always be explaining in great paragraph detail. Of course, the students won't read it. We already know this. Couple of things to keep in mind, though, as you're working through how to create a syllabus as manifesto, is to concern yourself with whose manifesto you're interested in this being a representation of. So obviously, I've given you some suggestions on the manifesto being yours, but perhaps you want to consider the syllabus as the student's manifesto or a co-constituted manifesto. This would require a little bit more conversation with students about what they hope to get out of the course, and not just doing a survey to take in that information, but also incorporating that into the course content in some meaningful way. I take this quote from Audre Lorde to emphasize the value of a co-constituted manifesto for your course. The learning process is something you can incite, literally incite, like a riot. And I love the idea that you could actually engage your students with the learning goals of the course in such a way that they're mobilized behind it. So I want to take a note on decolonizing the syllabus at this point as we transition into how we work with accessibility in the syllabus. But I want to be clear that this is not a specialization that I'm emphasizing in this session today. And if you would like more information on decolonizing the syllabus, CTL offers a series of really great workshops. They have videos. And of course, there are people at the CTL who specialize on this work. And I highly recommend you doing a bit more legwork as you approach these projects in your syllabus. However, what I will say before moving on from this is that one of the really important aspects of taking a decolonial approach to your syllabus is to identify the systems of power that are maintaining ideological and social hierarchies in your syllabus. These impact how you select the content for your course. So what is driving your understanding of what the content should be, what strategies and perspectives you are using to teach and that you are teaching the students, what traits and backgrounds of students we are expecting to engage with, and are you making any embedded assumptions in what knowledge base the students are bringing to your course, and your expectations of what success is and what success means. So that's not an exhaustive list, but it is ways to start thinking about these ideological and social hierarchies that your current syllabus design might be maintaining. So I have a question here, just a food for thought. How are you currently challenging or maintaining hierarchies through your syllabus design? Keeping in mind, however, that as Eve Tuck and Wang Yang have very clearly noted, decolonization is not a metaphor. And the true goals of decolonization are land restitution. It is removing the colonial from the space. And obviously, this is not something that can be done in a syllabus document in any real fashion. So keeping in mind as you move forward on this, that you are taking steps to confront the colonial power hierarchies that are informing your syllabus, but there's always more work to be done. So taking on board power hierarchies and assumptions is really what's going to guide this third section of the presentation. The first piece I want to look at in terms of accessibility and inclusion with your syllabus is institutional culture. So right at the very beginning, I talked about how the basic elements of the syllabus are already provided for you, usually by your department and your university. This is actually a place where there is power and authority structures to be challenged. Because there's the requisite policy, which is under institutional and departmental control, but this is in combination with learned or hidden cultural or field-specific rules and expectations that you might not fully realize you are assuming. And combined, this can create syllabi which are inaccessible to a wide variety of students from diverse backgrounds and experiences. So obviously there are places we can make changes and places we can't. But even then, changes can, while opening up new access points and engaging students who were otherwise not engaged because they were hitting these institutional or hidden cultural barriers. But changes can also lead to confusion and more engagement barriers for the students who were maybe already adjusted to the institutional and cultural frameworks that were assumed in the first place. So always being careful that as you take those actions to make changes, those changes are moving towards universal design that all students can understand. One of the ways that we start to confront and challenge is through diverse ways of knowing. Brent Meyer's work, Inclusive by Design, which is a framework that stresses, there's a large list, in fact, this is just a summary, diverse ways of knowing and culturally responsive content in your course design, accessibility and flexibility, and here I would really emphasize looking up universal design for learning principles around accessibility and flexibility in course design, variation in levels of analysis and modes of class interaction to reach students who aren't as accustomed to the traditional, lecture style interaction or even group work. Formative assessment, and backward design. And this is really important, particularly around assumed skill sets and knowledge, because formative assessment and backwards design involves stepped education where students learn and practice skills before applying them in increasingly more important assessments in the course. Then in this way, you don't lose students who didn't already adapt to those skills prior to taking your course. Clarity of learning objectives and alignment with course assessments and content is really important and really comes back to that idea that I was talking about earlier around having students understand the why of the learning rather than simply the how. And finally, and I will give a little bit more advice on how to affect change in these aspects, tone, appeal, and philosophy. So looking at the representation of the actual document can set a large set of variables for the tone of your syllabus. And just initially, you can think about the various modes by which you might deliver your syllabus. So for example, providing it in a digital format and a print format. Syllabus FAQ webpage, perhaps, so that students can engage with the syllabus by, search term. Course infographic, which I can actually show you an example of, and I will in a minute. Newsletter syllabus is a different approach to the syllabus, which breaks the information out into a more visually accessible format than the traditional 8.5 by 11 black and white text document. A video syllabus might be an option to go over the syllabus in video format, and perhaps other modes of delivery as well. So just really quickly here, I'm going to show you a couple of those that I have used in prior courses. So this is an infographic syllabus or a visual syllabus. So you can see I have not all the details, so I have to provide students the full formal syllabus alongside this. And in any version of the syllabus I ever provide, I always provide that really traditional boilerplate syllabus because it is the one the students are most accustomed to. So it's a good reference point, and it contains all the course policies and the department policies and the institutional policies, which you can't get around. Obviously, those are not here. However, this one pager gives students a sense of everything that has to happen in the course, really pulling the most essential pieces from the syllabus and putting it into a one pager for students. This is the magazine style syllabus. So this is the front page. We have the name of the course, location, time, And the course description and the learning outcomes. This is really the description of the course in summary. What is in this course guide and page numbers. I want to be very clear, all of the text content that we're about to see is matched exactly to the traditional syllabus. So there's nothing missing from this version of the syllabus. So on my course instructor page, there's a picture of me, information about myself, about my philosophy, my contact information, which is incredibly important for students, and an email policy. So everything to do with me and students' interaction with me is here on this page. And then on the sort of matching page is the class environment. And this is, it contains a land acknowledgement, class environment around critical discussions that we'll be having. There's a note about how students might need to anticipate changes to the syllabus. So I refer to the syllabus as a living document. So the next 2 pages are the course requirements and assessment, and it has descriptions of each course requirement and deadlines where necessary and the breakdowns. The next 2 pages are the university and course policies, the boilerplate policies. So all of this is really what is required of me by Queen's, although I do have my own specific submission policy and accommodations language. And the thing is that any of these can be adapted to your own language. So keep that in mind. There's the piece that is required, obviously for legalese reasons, you might not want to change it, but add your own in and around it. You know, situate the policies within your course to give students a little bit more meaning and understanding to how these policies operate. And then we have the course outline. In the traditional syllabus, this is where there's one major deviation. In the traditional syllabus, all the readings would be in full citation. And then my back page is just some notes on the remote participation, because this was offered in a weird hybrid year. All right. So you can see that there are different ways that we can provide the syllabus to students, and offering multiple ways of access to the syllabus is one way to engage students in reviewing the syllabus more frequently, but also allowing students to understand the content of your course who might be facing barriers around assumed cultural knowledge or institutional barriers. Another thing we can do is in that first horrible syllabus week is introducing the syllabus activities. So Easter eggs, very famous examples here, a professor leaving $100 in an envelope somewhere on campus, and the location of said $100, you know, is embedded in the syllabus deep in the legal text. Syllabus quiz, you have the students review the syllabus and then complete an online quiz about content. Another piece which I used in one of my courses is actually negotiating content. One thing that I almost always negotiate with students is the time of day they want the deadlines to be. There's a lot of debate around when deadlines should be, and so I leave it up to my students to decide. And another thing that is important is moving beyond that first week. Referencing your syllabus consistently throughout the course, right up until the very end, is a helpful way of drawing students' attention back to the syllabus. So constantly referencing pieces of the syllabus in very explicit ways. So another consideration we have in terms of physical representation of the syllabus is the depth of the content. Are we going whole kitchen sink, full descriptions of all assignments, weekly learning topics, all rubrics embedded in the syllabus? I use rubrics. Notice they're not in my syllabi, right? So really the entire course is in a single, you could just give the students a book and they've got the course. Or is it bare essentials? Are you focusing on those learning outcomes, the table of deadlines, the readings they are required to read, and assessments? Right? So you need to find that balance in the depth of the representation, because obviously really thick syllabi are going to deter students from reading through them, but they can be more helpful in terms of everything was handed to the students on day one, and you can consistently reference it throughout the course. If your assessment strategies and course content should align with your learning objectives and outcomes, which if you take any of the CTL sessions on course design, that is the case. And your course policies should always align with your pedagogy. Then why shouldn't your syllabus also meet course objectives and pedagogical goals? What I mean by this is that you can make the syllabus more meaningful to students by integrating your teaching philosophy and pedagogy with the syllabus itself and its delivery to students. So these are just a few suggestions on how you can actually incorporate the syllabus into the pedagogy of your course and into the course as a learning object. First, consider the syllabus as an integrated course object of course content. Thus, it is informed similarly to your other course content. So if you have guiding principles about what content gets into your course, is the syllabus meeting those principles? And if it isn't, then why isn't it? And consider how you can make those adjustments. So for example, if you have a student-centered learning pedagogy and the rest of your course is structured to student-centered learning, there should be student-centered language in your syllabus. If you have a hybrid course and it's being delivered in a hybrid way, then your syllabus should also be delivered in a hybrid way. This gets to the idea of using the syllabus as a formative learning object. So reproducing course expectations in the syllabus. A really, really obvious example of this, which the previous syllabi that I demonstrated did not demonstrate, is if you have a required citation style, use that style consistently in your syllabus, right? So reflect the expectations of the course in the syllabus. If you are requiring assignments submitted in different formats, produce the syllabus in different formats so that students see the skills that they are required to produce given to them via the syllabus. Active learning engagement. If you have a huge active learning component to your course, maybe you can start introducing students to that active learning skill set by doing an active learning activity with the syllabus. And finally, being responsive to student-led design through the consideration of the syllabus as a living document is a really great approach for building in flexibility and reflexivity and really bringing students in on the manifesto side. So, you know, I've already discussed a couple of ways you can do this, but other ways you might approach this might be having a review of syllabus components halfway through the semester, if what's working, what's not, what can be changed. A really important piece of this is that you actually make it a clear statement of the syllabus. At some point in the syllabus, you should have a statement that says there are pieces that might come under negotiation. The syllabus will respond to whatever external stimuli is required, or and very particularly, weekly readings and assignments will be subject to change is a really important statement to put in the syllabus, and build in a barrier of timeline on that. So what is the latest that a syllabus component can be changed before it isn't set in stone? So if you are going to open up your syllabus to alteration, you need to clarify the means and policy of that alteration on day one. So last thing, and the video is over and you can go on your merry way. This is just a free writing and thought piece for yourself. Review the syllabus you currently have for one change that you could make to bring your pedagogy into the syllabus, to think of your syllabus as a new metaphor, potentially a manifesto, to increase the accessibility of your syllabus by challenging the assumed structures, assumed cultural learning structures, and the institutional structures that are currently informing it. So any of those pieces, what is one thing you might do? To what extent can you personalize some of the institutional content? How might changing the ordering and preferencing of items in the syllabus alternately engage students and components of your course? What is the breadth and depth that you need on your syllabus? What areas might need to be expanded, and where might you find room to reduce? Or any other thoughts you might have on how you can advance your syllabus. So thank you so much for taking the time to view this virtual version of the syllabus workshop. I have cited several sources throughout this video, so I'm just going to put this literature and resources page up, and if you want to take note of any in particular, you can do so. And thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.